I am going to start. All right. Well, first, I would like to extend a big thank you to those of you who are here on this beautiful, officially 73-degree day in downtown Juneau. But really, I do appreciate your engagement. This is our second public forum update on New City Hall. And I just want to let you know that all of this presentation, our previous presentation, and a lot of our information is posted on the website that you see here on this slide. We also have an email address, newcityhall@list.ci.juneau.ik.us to field questions, feedback. And because some of you may be listening to this recorded, I want to let you know that we'll be monitoring that so that we can still get your questions and make sure we respond to them, but also share them with the Assembly when we present the feedback from this meeting to the Assembly. So go ahead and next slide, I'll cover what we're going to talk about tonight. So first, I want to let you know kind of how the information in the evening will go. After an introduction, I will quickly bring you up to speed on kind of how we got to where we are. And I don't want to belabor that too much because I know a lot of you have been following from the beginning, but it's also important to understand the background on this project and where we are in the process. We're going to try to be pretty open with questions and comments, especially since I think there were 5 of you public members last time I checked. So use that chat function to ask questions. And Jean, who is on the CBJ team, I'll introduce Jean Wren, Chief Architect, and Cable Comas Contract Manager. They're part of the CBJ team, and Jean will be monitoring questions and interrupting me from time to time to answer those in real time. We also will be collecting those questions and answers and posting them both on the website and sharing them with the Assembly when we present feedback on this meeting to the Assembly.
And just to clarify, it's actually the Q&A function.
Oh, thank you. I know those are two
I don't see the chat anymore, so it's Q&A now. Thanks.
I appreciate that clarification, Jean. I know that they're different. So please feel free to just enter your comments and your questions in that Q&A function. And after I get you up to speed, we'll hand it over to Northwind, who's the architect that's been working on this project. And then we will have time at the end of the meeting to bring you over and get some verbal comments and verbal feedback and questions. So that's how this hopefully not too long, but very informative meeting will go. Next slide. All right, why do we need a new City Hall? Why are we even talking about City Hall? And we use the word new City Hall because we're looking at building a new City Hall and a new site, but really we need some TLC for the existing City Hall. The current facility is over 70 years old. It's a converted fire hall, which is why there are no windows in assembly chambers. And it needs a lot of maintenance. It needs about $12.5 million to be invested into it to get another 25 years out of it. More importantly, currently city offices are spread between 5 buildings downtown, 4 of which CBJ rents. I'm talking to you now from Marine View, which is actually primarily an apartment building. So vacating these offices would free up 20 apartments in downtown Juneau for space. And we're spending about $820,000 a year on rent. So when you take the capital costs that we need to invest in our new City Hall, the rent that we're paying every year, it really makes fiscal sense for the city to own its City Hall and its office space. Next slide. So we reignited this conversation about City Hall in 2021, fall of 2021 with a survey. You may remember pre-pandemic, there was a lot of public dialogue about the downtown transit center. And what we wanted to do with this approach was cast a really wide net on how the public uses City Hall, how they engage with their local government, and site selection and structure our matrix and our criteria for site selection around what the public values. And so we got about 1,300 responses. Obviously it was self-selected, so you had to kind of care enough to respond. But these are the criteria that the public prioritize: long service life, adequate parking, high energy efficiency. Those were the top 3 items. People were pretty supportive of not renting space and kind of understand what that means for the city. Next slide. I just wanted to post this here so that you can understand the lens that staff and the assembly and the architect team went through when doing site selection. Again, these criteria were drawn from the public outreach, and there's a matrix on the website that takes a number of sites and runs them through this litany of questions and criteria. Next slide. So these are some of the sites that were considered. We presented these to the Public Works and Facilities Committee, really trying to cast a wide net. I will say that we were really hopeful that we would be able to purchase an existing building and remodel it, just being a very kind of efficient and green thing to do. A lot of facilities have been purchased over the last couple of years. And as you know, the city moves relatively slowly. 410 Willoughby and 400 Willoughby are two buildings that were high on our list that Central Council recently purchased. Bill Ray Center was also a really good candidate that we did a thorough review of. Gold Bell Building also reached out to those owners, and we did a pretty thorough review of the current ADF and G building as well, looking at if that would be a good fit. So unfortunately, none of those sites really rose to the top for obvious reasons, like no one wanted to sell them to us and other reasons. But the committee did choose top 4 projects, and those are top 4 sites, and those are the 4 that we looked into further. And that was status quo, because you always have to have a status quo option. Really, we're comparing everything to the status quo option. The 450 Whittier lot, which is the lot we're going to focus on today, that's next to the Zach Gordon Youth Center, on top of the downtown parking garage and the Walmart building. A lot of public support for repurposing that facility. So I'm going to briefly touch on each one of those sites so you can understand why they were removed from the list. Next slide. So we already talked a little bit about what the status quo looks like. You know, some pros are, there was a lot of feedback and they're about, you know, don't build anything, don't do anything new. Cons are, of course, that it's expensive to sink into a facility that doesn't meet our needs and, you know, doesn't improve parking in downtown Juneau. Next slide. The downtown transit center probably had the most work put into it because that was explored before. You know, some of the pros of that is it maintains a presence in the core downtown area. It doesn't take up other valuable real estate. And it's easy to create some dedicated parking. While it doesn't create growth in parking, creating that dedicated parking space would be easy. One of the cons that the assembly really cared a lot about was the street level access, really feeling like a city hall should be on street level and that level from like a interaction with the public perspective. And, you know, that facility was constructed to hold 3 more floors of either office space or parking. So potentially, if you don't build office on there, you can build more parking on there. And so there is an opportunity cost associated with that. Next slide. The former Walmart building that got a lot of public support for doing something with this facility, which I think all of us can agree, this is a centrally located building in our town, and we'd love to see something done with it. So we took a really good look at it. We toured the facility, did some space program analysis of it. You know, some of the pros, of course, are its location between the 2 centers of population, the support to reuse it, and that there's really a lot of parking. Some of the cons are it really would be prohibitively expensive to bring that facility up to the LEED standard that we're required to bring it up to, and just current building code. It's built for retail, not for office. And so there's a far more extensive requirements for office space that just become very expensive. It's also a great location for retail. It's really the only large industrial lot in that area. And so kind of preserving that for our community is important. And it's, you know, 3 times the space that we would need. Now there's a lot of there could be a lot of creativity with other uses for that space, but it's a lot of space that CBJ just does not need for City Hall. And, you know, really significantly is the building itself is for sale, but there's a long-term land lease underneath it. So that's almost $300,000 a year, and the city still wouldn't achieve the objective of owning our own facility. So that one got moved off the list by the Assembly. Next slide. So this is the site that the Assembly looked at, that chose to look at further, and what we're going to talk about today. That is a picture, obviously not taken on a sunny, beautiful day like today. Some of the pros of this that we're going to talk about more are the synergy in this the Aqua Village district with the tribal government presence, the state government presence, the state library and museum facility. There's a lot of parking in the area, and now some of it's being used and dedicated, but there's still just a lot more parking spots available in the area. Opportunity to build underground parking, and some of those same reasons are why it would be a con. It could be a really great site for some other potential use, housing being an example. So next slide. So I want to just talk about the process a little bit so you know where we are. We are, of course, at the public meeting tonight on May 19th. And the next step is to take all of your comments this meeting to the Committee of the Whole on the 6th and get the support of the Assembly to introduce an ordinance to put new City Hall on the municipal ballot. So, we are really at a conceptual phase of design and feasibility. And this project only goes somewhere if the voters approve taking it somewhere. So we will be, pending Assembly approval of putting that on the ballot, we will be reaching out and doing more public education and, speaking to different groups. So please reach out if that's something that your group would be interested in. Next slide. All right, I want to talk a little bit about parking. We did do a parking analysis of the site. CDD did that for us, just because it's so important and it's so central to this project. I don't think we have every element of parking figured out. I will acknowledge that it's something that if this project moves forward, we need to spend more time and resources on. But some of the pros of this site are CVJ actually owns most of the 522 parking spots in the immediate area. You can see that on that map there. Now, some of those spots are leased to the state. Some are used by Centennial Hall, but there's opportunity for shared use agreements, with evening meetings and events and office workers. And so there's a lot of opportunity there, but also a lot of need to spend real time and attention, looking at that. And another piece that hasn't really been looked at is the loss of 741 state jobs since 2014. And what that looks like for parking. I mean, we really haven't seen the post-COVID state employee demands, and they haven't looked at their parking leases since COVID and since that time. So again, more work to be done. There is, of course, the opportunity to build 36 spaces underground. That does add to the project cost, but this site has that opportunity. And the North State Office Building parking garage is in the vicinity, could serve that entire area, and there's some momentum to look at expanding that. Certainly it's a future project that's out there, but when you look at long-term parking needs, freeing up some of that surface parking for more development would probably be beneficial to the community in the area. Jean, any questions? I assumed I might get questions on parking that I probably don't have answers to, but I really want to make sure I pause here and let any of my lovely attendees ask a question.
No questions yet.
Okay, thank you guys. Easy on me. Next slide. All right, now I'd like to hand it over to James Bibb, who's going to talk about the plans for that site in City Hall.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Katie, and thank you all for showing up tonight. My name is James Bibb. I'm with Northwind Architects here in Juneau. And through this portion of the presentation, we're going to get into the conceptual design to give you some images and some slides to cover our work to date. Before I do that, I want to introduce our design team that's going to be talking tonight. We have Sean Boyley, who's my business partner here with Northwind Architects, and Steve Simpson at SRS Architects out of Portland, Oregon. And the last time we were together, we were working on a fantastic project here in Juneau, which is the Mendenhall Valley Library. And so we kind of resurrected that team. We had such a great civic process and with the civic building. So we wanted to kind of bring that team back together to work on this project. And I will add that Steve Simpson He's he's from Juneau originally. We go back a long ways. So he's also worked on the SLAM, the State Library Archives and Museum project here in Juneau, as one of the lead designers. And he's very familiar with the Oak Village District and really well connected to the community. So so this team, I think, we're having a lot of fun, to be frank, on this project and getting into it. The slide you're seeing right now is where we started. We, once we got thinking about a city hall for Juneau, we of course look at city halls elsewhere to get our feet underneath us a little bit, and it's pretty natural to look at city halls around the state of Alaska in comparison. So we like to look at Anchorage and Fairbanks, and we found a postcard somewhere back in Juneau, and this is I didn't know about this image. I've been there a long time, but this image predates me a ways, and we found a picture of City Hall in Juneau back in the days, and the thing we recognize with these city halls around the state is they have a really beautiful civic nature about them, and they're very strong, and they're intentional, I guess, and they have a meaning. So the current city hall right now in the lower right, that's where we are right now. This is really the basis of our process, where we are starting from. Next slide. So going back to Anchorage, the city hall there, the historic city hall, at some point, I would imagine back in the 80s, they came to a point where they really needed to expand. You can imagine the growth in their city like ours. And the new city hall has done that. And this is a picture of the new city hall in downtown Anchorage. So in a way, we're looking at that as a sort of a pilot project of what we're trying to do. Next slide. We also looked at the site that we have chosen to be the basis for our concept, the Oak Village District, formerly known as the Willoughby District. And we've done a lot of work in this area over the years, anticipating growth. And this slide shows a relationship of many of our very strong civil and cultural buildings in Juneau. And to show the relationship, it forms kind of a neighborhood in a sense of these buildings connected to each other and referencing each other. We have the K2 building in the lower left, the Jack, Centennial Hall, the State Office building, the State Library Archives and Museum building, which was a new addition a number of years back, Clinton and Haida tribal offices. And we expect this district to grow. And this goes back to the 60s when there was looking in the future, this area pretty much, the vision back at that time looked pretty close to what we're proposing with these buildings sort of providing or located in a very important civic and cultural neighborhood to Juneau. Now we've showed a little. This is a little sketchy. We've showed a lot of green space in this diagram, and the purpose of that is to look ahead and consider the potential of the site. SHI, the Sea Alaska Heritage Institute. If you ever come downtown, you see the way these buildings starting to work together, and they form a beautiful plaza. So the State Library Archives and Museum building really anchors the end of that plaza connected to the State Office building. And we hope to see the parking there transition over time as that is planned out and designed in a more orderly fashion. And the potential of these public spaces interacting, we think the proposed City Hall will be a nice neighbor to all these other buildings. Next slide. So before we get to those beautiful images and renderings, we have to start basically from a spreadsheet. And so what typically happens, we have a spreadsheet that identifies all the area that needs to go into the new City Hall. That's all the departments, all the uses. And we like to look at them as quickly as possible, get off the spreadsheet and put them into something we can all connect with. And so we like to work in 3 dimensions. And so the image in the upper left is all the program that we are proposing for this new building, laid out in relationship based on the size. It also has color distinction between different departments and different uses. And taking that, you can see the program distribution per level, the image on the lower left. You know, our site is about 45,000 square feet. So divide that by 3 levels, which we plan to use. It was about 15,000 square feet per floor. So we look at using this diagram, this program square footage, and how they relate to each other. And we have a lot of the main public rooms on the lower level, the ground floor, next to the entry in the lobby. And as you go up through the floors, you can see other departments finding their place in the relationship. Next slide. So further, taking these diagrams a little further, we like to show these floors in context. So we call them stacking diagrams, but you start to see the relationship per floor on that site connected to an entry plaza off the parking lot, the current parking lot. And there's another view in the lower left showing the Zach Gordon Youth Center as a reference for scale and location. So with these diagrams, we're really looking at how these individual program pieces interrelate with each other. The upper left there, the little X through that golden box, that is, we're looking at our city assembly chambers being sort of high up in proximity to the entry and looking out over the entry plaza. Next slide. We quickly get into floor plans. So what we developed is floor plans looking at each floor. From left to right, we have the ground floor, the second floor, and the third floor. So the ground floor, we've started to, the big blue arrow shows the main entry off the plaza, off the parking, and the introduction and a very generous large entry. The yellow space depicts our common lobby spaces. The light green is our main public spaces, spaces we expect to be used mainly for public meetings, city assembly, and so forth. The blue is the designated for the administration portion of our program. So you see all of them sort of related to each other. We put those red circles in there to identify the main entries to these individual departments, to get a sense that all these are like a neighborhood, like we talked about with the Oak Village District, that we envision that these departments will be very clear where they're at. So if you walk in the lobby, you'll be able to connect to them right away. They'll have a strong connection to a very formal open public space. If you look very closely, it may be hard to see on our diagrams at this scale, but we're starting to show furnishings, a little scale of what's happening inside. We're also identifying a very centralized, nice formal public staircase to bring you in the entry, up through the main lobby and up through the formal assembly chambers on the second floor. Next slide. If you take this, the plans, you tip them on the side and kind of go through the middle. This is it shows you a building section. So what this building section shows is the relationship on the right there with the person standing in a tree and a car. Well, that's our plaza. That depicts the parking areas, your main arrival, the connection to that big public area that I showed earlier. So our assembly chambers in the meeting room, that's directly off of this main place. That'll be the first location for these very important formal rooms. As you work inward, you can see the yellow lobby spaces, and there's that large stair in the middle there, kind of helping to bring people up to these main public areas. The light blue, that's showing those administrative offices that are part of this project. From these rooms, you'll be able to get some great views. So out of the assembly chambers, we know we'll be able to look down the channel, see Mount Jumbo. We'll also be able to look up out of the offices towards Mount Juneau, Mount Roberts. This does depict a little bit of parking. There's an option of parking underneath the building. So that's depicted in the gray color there. Next slide. I'd like to hand this over to Steve Simpson.
Thank you, James. So James spent a little time talking about the interior workings of the building. I would like to focus on the exterior. And so before I do that, I'd like to just kind of plant a seed in your mind, something to think about, where city halls can kind of loosely be referred to as the people's forum, essentially a place for people to interact with their city government. So as we go through the next 8 or so slides, I'd like you to think about what that interactive experience could be like. So on your screen here, you see 4 somewhat stylistically random city halls from various points of the country. And there are 3 historic city halls and 1 contemporary one down in the lower right. And they might seem random, but they have some very similar attributes, if you will, or traits. They all use brick, which gives a city hall kind of the stylistic dignity, but most importantly, the brick gives the buildings a sense of permanence. It's a very hard material. It's a very lasting material. You can see these historic buildings are probably 100+ years old. The next attribute or trait that I would like to kind of discuss is the idea of the civic plaza out in front, which often does lead to the main entrance of the building. Some entrances are more generous than others, which I'd like to talk about later. But these civic spaces are really important for public events. You know, you can imagine it's really the people's living room. And so we're kind of inclined to really kind of pay attention to that and see if we can bring that idea into this project. You know, it could be used for Saturday market, or let's say a band setup, or even, you know, a civic ceremony or a periodic protest. The other commonality in these buildings is the assembly chambers. Now, in the historic versions that you see here, the assembly chambers, like the current city hall that you have in Juneau, is buried in the middle of these buildings and most likely a lightless space. Where if you take a look at the lower right in that more modern example, we're very intrigued by the fact that the city hall actually plays a role in the making of the elevation of the building. So when you pass by that building, you see the interaction. You know, city government is transparent. And when you're in that room looking out, you have a sense of the changing day, but also you can take advantage of, you know, the great views that it might have to offer. Another kind of a common motif that you see in all these is the clock. And we feel like there's nothing that says City Hall like a good clock. So as we go into the next slides, you'll see some of those common attributes that we're exploring in the making of the new City Hall. So this is a set of diagrams that build on one another. And so you'll kind of see the evolution of our thinking and how we're approaching the making of the overall public facade of this building. So we start with a very simple energy efficient building form, roughly 45,000 square feet. All three of those plans that James showed you would fit inside that building mass. You move to the second slide, or the second image there, we're pulling out a public plaza. And that's that public forum space again. You know, it's that outdoor space that becomes the city living room. That is immediately connected, that's shown inside slide 3, to a recessed entrance that is protected from the weather. That's roughly 12 feet deep. So when you stand there, let's say you're waiting for a ride, you can stand under that cover and be well protected from the snow and rain. And then the fourth image, we're basically elevating that public assembly room to the second floor, giving it a civic prominence. But also it's reaching up to, you know, the daylight, but also the fantastic views down the channel and out to Mount Jumbo, as James referred to earlier. Next. So here you can see a little further development. We're putting some glazing in. Along the side of the building, we have a public meeting room that is pulled forward as well. And then towards the back of the building is the garage entrance. And this is the upper left-hand image. And that garage entrance is immediately opposite of the Slams garage entrance. So we're kind of keeping the vehicle traffic focused in one area, very separate from the pedestrian entry point. And that's for safety reasons. So as you can see, all the public rooms are pulled forward, and the building is starting to kind of take on this really interesting sculpted quality. And to make that more real, if we go to the next slide, here it is in its site, you know, with its brick cladding glowing like a lantern on a beautiful snowy night in Juneau. The public plaza is pulled out. You can see as it leads to the main entrance. The assembly chambers above, it's actively in use. There's an assembly meeting going on as we speak, right at 7 o'clock. So, and we think that keeping it extremely simple and very buildable and easily maintainable is really important for this building. We want to be good stewards of public funds. Next. So we'd like to talk about brick as well. You know, I mentioned it earlier, and brick, as I said on those earlier examples, gives a government building kind of a civic quality, you know, the sense of permanence, like it's going to be there for 100 years. As you see in the Alaska State Capitol. The brick that we're interested in using is a little darker brick, and the darker the brick, typically it's more durable. It stays in the kiln longer and it gets harder. And what we like about this brick is that it for one, it kind of harmonizes in a very graceful way with Mount Juneau as a backdrop, and you can see the crags in Mount Juneau there. This brick has a similar quality to it, but it also has this really lovely iridescent sheen. So it'll kind of be very dynamic and change throughout the day. And if you look at this lower left-hand image, it's a building that actually uses that brick at, you know, at the golden hour or at nighttime. The building warm light, in contrast to the kind of anchored darker brick, gives it a really beautiful quality that we're very interested in. Next, and it's incredibly durable. So here it is, clad in a little more detail. The building's entirely clad in brick in a very simple manner, very maintainable. And if we clad this building in brick, it'll last 100 years plus. So here you can see the extended plaza that we're pulling out, which leads to the generous covered oak entrance. And then the open stair as you move up to the wood-clad assembly hall above, which leads us actually to the next image. Next, boom, there you have it. Fantastic view out to the channel and Mount Jumbo beyond. The large window is flanked by light controlling drapes, but also they'll help mitigate some of the acoustical issues as well. And if I can focus you on the head wall, just behind the assembly people there, the dais, that shape on the wall is actually, as you probably recognize, is the greater city and borough of Juneau, which happens to be one of the biggest boroughs in the country. So we thought, let's celebrate it. Let's get it up on the wall. You can see the channel, you can see a portion of Admiralty Island. It becomes kind of an interesting focal point. I'll come back to this room in a minute, but next we're going to talk about sustainability. So we heard from your survey that you want to make a lasting building, which we're all about. And I think another thing that you had mentioned was a very sustainable building. And so we're looking at a very high performance building envelope with insulation, you know, used on the outside of the stud wall, which basically puts a warm jacket all the way around the building, but also high performance glazing or windows. And then if you look at the lower left-hand image, you can see the orientation on the assembly chambers below. So when there's an assembly meeting going on, the sun has actually come around from the south side of the building around 7 o'clock. There would be no direct sunlight in that room itself. We'd also like to think about that room as being solar panel ready. So during construction, it doesn't cost a lot of money to basically put in the infrastructure to provide for future solar panels. And once they're available and can be purchased, they can be installed on this building. And we think, given that exposure, it's prime, it's perfect for power generation. We also embrace the fact that the city, you know, has a lead mandate that we think that it sets a benchmark that will really bring this building up to a very high sustainable level. We're also very interested next in kind of really digging deep and understanding innovative sustainable strategies. And you can see here, the big window provides light and view, but it also could be used as a solar collector. So during the day, in the morning and noontime, the sun can come through that window and you can heat radiant pipes that you see here on the right, which is a courthouse that I worked on here in Portland, Oregon. That whole southeast facade became this giant solar collector. And so all 17 floors have these radiant pipes running through the floor. That's of course overlaid with concrete and tile. And that warms up, and that heat is taken to the cooler parts of the building. And this system can also be done with just simple ductwork located, basically registers located high in the assembly chambers wall. So as that air rises in that room from heat, that can quickly be drawn off and taken to the cooler parts of the building. So it's strategies like this that we're extremely interested in exploring, and there's a multitude of them. And so, you know, with public support, we're hoping we can make this happen. So we have one more thing to talk about, and I'd like to hand it over to Sean now to talk about costs.
Hey, Steve. I'm Sean Boyley, one of the partners here at Northwind, and often falls to me to deliver this part of a presentation. Construction costs today, I'm sure you're all aware, are quite high for any type of construction, and that kind of makes it puts us in a situation where if we're going to build anything, we need to do it in a way that's worthwhile, a way that will last and have that ability to serve our community for generations to come.
Excuse me, Sean, could you speak up a little? Folks are having trouble hearing you.
You bet. So basically, from our perspective, contemporary architecture is it's not about ornament. It's about developing rational strategies for serving people and communities. Those strategies are in thinking about investing in systems that deliver good return in terms of energy consumption. So as we've seen with many public buildings in Juneau, we implement heat pump technology to best capitalize on our green electric power that we have here through our public utility. And of course, as Steve has mentioned, choosing good, durable materials with a great feel to them, and that the materials themselves become a great expression of kind of a civic nature and a commitment to that responsibility to the public. So, you know, a material like brick is very much in that category. So in looking at a project like this, we engage professional cost estimators to assist us with looking at our national and regional and local economies and determining what cost of construction is now and what's going to be in a couple of years when a building like this could conceivably, with your approval, and move forward. So we've developed a construction cost with 2 years of escalation. That construction cost is taking into account the extreme highs that we've seen lately and what we anticipate seeing for escalation for the next couple of years. The basic building in this case is about $28.4 million for construction. You add the development cost to that, that would be the city's cost for administering the project, paying your professional design team to develop this architecture, engineering, and all that. There's a fairly hefty contingency in there to cover unknowns for, you know, that could come up over the course of design and construction, and of course permitting and the like. So that adds another 33.5% or so to a project. So you're looking at a $9.5 million development cost for a total of a $37.9 million construction. Now we've talked a bit about that lower parking level, and it is very expensive as parking goes. However, you are building a foundation under the building. there's a fair amount of utility in having that on-site parking from an accessibility standpoint. Also from the standpoint of taking care of city-owned vehicles that serve as building department or the police or whoever in the whichever department would get to use that space. That parking is pushed down to touch the edge of where the ocean rises into gravels under that area, similar to the way the parking under the State Museum across the street is. And that all adds cost to that endeavor. But it's definitely worth considering in the parking discussion here in Juneau. That lower level is looking at like $3.3 million worth of construction for a total project cost of this project with a basement parking of about $41.2 million. So that's pretty much the big picture of what we anticipate the cost would be for something like this.
All right, it's my turn to wrap it up. So just kind of to let you know where we are between now and October, we will be doing more public education, more outreach, and having this conversation with more groups. So again, please reach out to me, reach out to the New City Hall email if that's something that you're interested in. Another piece that we are going to be doing is looking at cost saving opportunities. I can tell you a $40 million project is really a hefty price tag, and we need to look at all ways that we can reduce that cost. And part of it is it's such an early stage and there's been so much inflation in the construction market. So obviously, as we further refine design, hopefully you can reduce that contingency and get better numbers. Other things that we looked at an offsite assembly chambers. Well, could you have just chambers in Centennial Hall or Capitol Civic Center? Really flesh that idea a lot out, and there's just a lot of cons associated with it, in scheduling conflicts, user conflicts. But some of the other things that we need to look at is, are there efficiencies gained with consolidating staff into a single facility? I'll tell you, the program needs here are about 80 square foot cubicles for most city employees. So we're not talking about large spacious offices for the most part, but is there a way we can reduce program area? Maybe, we really haven't looked at what the post-COVID telework environment looks like. And this project will be a really good opportunity to have that conversation with the public and what does that look like? Is there an opportunity for savings there as we design it? So this is an invitation to you to give us some of those ideas too, that we can chew on, because I'm really cognizant of the fact that it's a high price point, and a lot of that's I don't think it's going to get any cheaper, but we also need to really turn over all those stones. And then parking, I mentioned before, is something that we need to look at better. It is, as Kay mentioned in the comments, really an expensive per parking price tag. On the other hand, dedicated parking for the public who uses that space is going to be really important. Can we achieve that with the existing parking in the area, and what does that look like? Really needs to be studied, because it's such an important priority for the public and for all of us, really. So that's where we are. Again, June 6th is when the committee of the whole is going to review your comments. And then that'll go before the assembly in June and July. So reach out to the assembly with your thoughts, reach out to the New City Hall email, and I will share them. And I'd like to open it up now for some kind of verbal comments or questions from our 13 participants. So we did pick up a few since we started, and I want to thank you all for listening in. And if you want to raise your hand, Caleb can bring you over and you can either ask a question or leave a comment.
While Caleb's doing that, I wanted to mention that the New City Hall email address is newcityhall@juneau.org.
While Caleb's doing that, I would like to point out one other element on the financial picture side of this. And that is, as a part of our effort, we did, and we haven't really touched on this at all in the presentation, but there was a fairly extensive economic analysis of doing this. And a city is not a house. A city is eternal entity, if you will. It's going to be there for generations. So your investments are quite long range, or can afford to be quite long range. So when you're looking at the cost of taking on a project like this, it's which is well, let me put it this way. There's a light at the end of the tunnel in that there is a time when not paying rent to property holders and the city having its own, occupying and maintaining its own property without those ancillary costs does have a return for our community. So that's just something to keep in mind in jumping into a new City Hall project.
There are no hands raised by any participants, so there don't appear to be any questions.
All right, well, Jean, will you put the new City Hall address, email address in the chat, because or in the Q&A, because I believe I typoed that and we do not have the correct one on the first slide. So we will edit that just as soon as this is over so that the correct information is on. But I want to make sure if someone, you know, wasn't able to get their comments in, they can, they have that address. And I just want to thank all of you for showing up on this beautiful day and learning a little bit more about this project. I look forward to, you know, working on it, and I'll bid you all good night. Thank you.
So Caleb, it looks like as a panelist, I think maybe only the host can post that in the Q&A. Well, I'll answer Kay's message with if anybody's still here.
Yeah, we have 12. They're dropping off
Okay.
here. But maybe, let's see, can I type an answer?
Yeah, looks like we can type it in as a response. But it doesn't-
Yeah,
Yep,
okay.
Oh, it
do
doesn't
that.
type it.
Is it letting you do it?
I haven't yet.
And that was newcityhall@juno.org, right, Jean?
Okay, newcityhall@juno.org.
I think it's letting me
Alright.
do it now.
Okay, awesome.
All right, it's up there. Let's enter the case.
All right.
We still have a few people on. I don't know if they have questions.
Well, if we got him the email address, did we get him the email address? Then I think we're good to go. We'll let everyone go enjoy their evening.
Yeah.
Thank you,
all
everyone.
for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you.